Nathan Fellman was a public middle school teacher and administrator in New Hampshire for nearly 20 years before leaving his job to launch a middle school microschool program in the fall of 2022. Nate and two of his colleagues from the public school system opened the Harkness House in Nashua, New Hampshire, that emphasizes personalized learning for 6th through 9th graders. Harkness House also offers hybrid homeschool programs for local youth ages 10 to 18 who want to access Harkness House classes. Harkness House currently has 10 full-time students with an additional 5 to 10 homeschool students on any given day. Nate Fellman, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Terry, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love talking about these topics and talking about education, so I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Well, it's great to have you here. I was really thrilled to be able to visit Harkness House last year, not long after you opened, and see what you've built, and also see the growth that you've encountered just in that short period of time, and more interest every day with the Harkness House. So thrilled to have you here. I'd love to start, Nate, with a little bit of your background, spending almost 2 decades in the public school system as a middle school teacher and an assistant principal. What got you into education to begin with? What was that drive for you?
So I always wanted to be a teacher. When I was in middle school, I wanted to be a teacher. And I should say also all of the teachers that I really admired, that I wanted to be like, said, don't do that. You don't want to do this. This is not the job for you. And so I didn't start my career in education. I didn't go to college for an education degree. I got a degree in English literature, which I'm not sure what I was going to do with that, but I read a lot of great books. Then I got out of college and I met my wife in college. She's from up here in New Hampshire. We moved here to be closer to her family. And when we moved and my job was going to change because we were moving, I said, you know what, I'm going to give teaching a try. And so the first job I actually got in a public school in New Hampshire was in 2003 as a paraprofessional. So I started out not even in a classroom teaching role, but really in a support role. And then got my master's degree in teaching and became a language arts teacher in the 8th grade in the public school in New Hampshire. And, from there, just kept doing it. But I always wanted to be a teacher. I really felt a passion for helping kids experience in the classroom what I had experienced, which was real growth and learning, and so that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah, and you really gravitated toward the middle school years. Obviously, now the Harkness House focuses exclusively or almost exclusively on the middle school. For sure, for the full-time students, it's just 6th to 9th graders, and then you do have a little bit of a wider range for the homeschool students. But I'm curious why middle school was so attractive to you. What is it about that age that you find really interesting?
So for me, we all have teachers that we loved, and we have teachers, I think from our backgrounds, we have teachers that maybe we struggled with. My favorite teachers were my middle school teachers from my own education. And it's such an interesting time for kids in that they're not quite yet, they're not yet doing the high school thing, but they're out of the elementary school thing. They won't do what you say just because you said it, which is kind of the elementary model. Yet they're not, quite developed to really articulate their own thoughts. And that transition there for me was something that I gravitated towards. And then really, the other thing is the first job I got was a K-8 district. So we only had a middle school. And so I knew I didn't want to be an elementary school teacher. That just isn't like, I think, frankly, I just don't have the constitution and patience for that. But I knew I wanted to work with older students, and we were in a K-8 system. And then when I started working in the middle school and got a full-time classroom teaching job, I just fell in love with the age group. It's such an interesting transition. And the other thing I found is because I worked in that district when it went from a K-8 district to a K-12 district, and what I saw was the resources just flowing to the polls, down to the early elementary or up to the older students. I really felt like our middle school students were getting left in the middle. I'm also a middle child. I'm one of three boys right in the middle. So that might have something to do with it too.
So the feeling a little neglected in middle
Yeah.
school.
Cam Brady. Cam Brady.
Yeah, yeah, and wanting to provide an option for them. So what was your path toward alternative education, education entrepreneurship? How did that come about? Were you growing increasingly dissatisfied with the public system and looking for something else, or what? I guess what was that evolution like for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. For me, I loved classroom teaching, even in the big public system that I was in. And I liked school administration. I really did. And then the pandemic hit. That was really the turning point for me. I had personal struggles, professional struggles. My wife's an ICU nurse in a local hospital, so I was homeschooling my kids, when they were on lockdown, and also trying to be an assistant principal, and things just came to a head. And then, as it all in 2021 started to come back together, I felt like we were in a big rush to get back to normal, and we had seen that normal wasn't that great, because of what the pandemic kind of revealed. Families were dissatisfied. Teachers were dissatisfied. I was dissatisfied. And one thing that I was really happy about in the pandemic, and there's only one, is that when our school went back to the hybrid, sort of coming back half the kids, half the time, we finally had small classes in the middle school, which is something that I've been arguing for as a teacher and administrator for years. And, it was just we can't do that, so we're sort of built on a 25 to 30 student class. But we saw 12 to 15 student classes during the pandemic, and kids came alive. I mean, kids that didn't usually participate, usually flew under the radar, not talking about what grades they got, just their engagement level, was typically low, and it just blossomed when they weren't competing with 20 other voices in the room. And so I said, I think we should do that in middle school. We should have small classes. And that's just something that's, for a variety of reasons, not going to happen in the traditional larger system. And so I got together with two colleagues, and we said, if we were going to write it from scratch and do it on our own, what would we commit to? And we said small classes, all three of us. We said small classes. And so we built our school capped at 12. There's never going to be a student population in any class with any teacher bigger than 12. And so that was the impetus for me. Wasn't a massive dissatisfaction with the system. I always had my problems with kind of the politics of public education and public funding mechanisms. But it was really seeing the student experience in smaller classes that was the trigger point for me.
So you became a recognized private school in the state of New Hampshire last summer, the summer of 2022, shortly before you opened your doors. What was it that attracted you to the private school model? Or I guess another way of putting it is, did you ever consider becoming a charter school, which is privately operated typically, but taxpayer funded? Or what was it that attracted you to sort of this small private school model?
So that was a big question when we were starting, was charter versus private. And all three of us are public school, educators. And so what we came down on that question was, we just really wanted to be out of system, just, completely out of system. And so the charter schools, New Hampshire, this is nothing to denigrate the charter school in New Hampshire. We have great charter schools in New Hampshire. And it's a really important system, a really important option. But we really just wanted to just be as far out of that bureaucracy as we could. And so that's why we chose what we did.
So tell us about your vision and how it sort of played out over the past year. What was sort of the educational philosophy that you were driving toward, that you were offering to families? How does it work in practice in terms of the structure of the days and weeks, particularly the blend now of your full-time private school students and your part-time homeschool students, about half, 10 and 10, kind of a
Yeah,
nice
yeah.
mix of both. So tell us about that.
So we're built on our philosophy of student engagement through student agency and autonomy. So, I mean, we think that the way you get kids interested is asking them what they want to do, rather than telling them what they have to do. And so that's why we have small classes. We're built around, I mean, our mission statement is around curiosity and creativity, and student autonomy. And so that's why we have that small class setup. And that's kind of what we're built on. But that creates an inefficiency problem, which is what the big system's up against, right? Is when we have small classes, you have a lot of teachers and not a lot of students. And so that's creates a sort of a revenue problem or a cash flow or an economic problem. And so we were always built around this idea that what happens in classrooms could also be, sort of recorded and produced and provided to the homeschool community as a sort of curriculum product. That's how we got into the homeschool kind of idea from our traditional private school, model that we started at. Was we set up the Harkness House in studio classrooms, so conference tables, 12 seats, and we set them up so that they could be recording studios. And our idea was we'll record our content and our curriculum and provide it to the homeschool community as a sort of product. And that's how we'll supplement our tuition revenue. That was sort of the original idea. And then you get down to the brass tacks of building all that and getting the students in and doing all that work. And what we found was, based on our timeline, we just weren't able to open on time. And we weren't able to drive that full-time enrollment in the first year. And so we pivoted really quickly, and he said, well, listen, full-time students, traditional full-time private school, public school, charter school students, they start in August, September. Homeschool students don't have a start date. They start whatever they're doing whenever they want to, and whenever the opportunity arises. So then we started saying, well, we have this space, we have these teachers, let's just do homeschool classes for a year, which is what we did our first year. We started with one homeschool student in October of 2022, and built that to 10 homeschool students over the course of last year. And then obviously the numbers that you've already said. And we built such a connection with that community, such a philosophical connection really with that community about the learner-centered, education and that piece. We found such a connection that when we opened for full-time this fall, and by the way, of those 10 homeschool students that started with us last year, 8 of them converted to full-time this year. So they said, hey, this is an option that actually I'm a homeschool parent, but this is an option that really connects with me. And so 8 of our 10 full-time students now were homeschool students last year. But so then we connected with that community. We made that transition to full-time kids this year, but we didn't want to lose that sort of option that we started with. So we kept all of our classes open to homeschool students that can attend on an a la carte. So if you want to come for a math class 2 days a week, you can do that. If you want to come for a full 2-day program, which is 4 classes, 2 days a week, you can do that either Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday. Or if you want to come for 4 classes, Monday through Thursday, you can do that. And then our full-time kids are 6 classes, 5 days a week, a traditional full-time schedule. But we always wanted to, we were founded on this engagement with the homeschool community, but then they really, the way we were opened, they really are what we're built on. And so we wanted to make sure that we honored that. And it's created such a great culture for us, going with this hybrid model of, again, our mission statement is every student is seated at the table. And now we really have every student, homeschool students, full-time students, part-time students that want to come 1 day a week, 1 time a week. And that's just been such a really engaging experience for not only our kids, but for our staff as well.
I love that. I think you're really showing all of these creative models with education, when we start thinking about education in new and different ways, which to your point, maybe the one positive thing that came out of COVID was seeing that teaching and learning could be different, and seeing the ways you could meet each individual child's needs. And so I love that you have these different enrollment options, and that actually some homeschoolers come part-time and realize they want to be there full-time. I think that's a testament to the environment you've created there. And of course, New Hampshire has long had a vibrant, robust homeschooling community that's only grown over the past few years. The Washington Post just had a state-by-state analysis of homeschooling growth, and New Hampshire is up almost 30% of homeschoolers over the past 6 years. So great to be able to tap into that community and provide additional services to meet their needs as well. So I'm curious what you're thinking about sort of for the future. I know that New Hampshire is also a leader in education choice policies, in enabling education funding to follow students. And many of your students participate in that, both homeschooled students and private school students. Tell us a little bit about where you see funding going and how you see that fitting into your growth plans and plans to serve larger groups of students in your community.
Yeah, so those programs, those school choice programs in New Hampshire are give access to kids to our type of learning environment that wouldn't otherwise necessarily have it. Both homeschool kids and full-time kids, full-time, year round, sort of the 180-day students. That those programs are essential to their access to our programming, because we have, obviously we're a tuition-based system. And so seeing students that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it, be able to come in with an education freedom account money that is the state funded money, that is their tax dollars following the child. It's been essential to where we are right now. And I only see it being more essential and looking to try to promote the expansion of that, because there's, in my view, there's not a real downside to it. And I see, 20 years in the public system, I see both sides of the, public dollars getting out of the public schools. But I think an interesting framing of that is, are those public dollars for public schools, or are they for public education? And in what ways should the market drive what educators do and the options that we provide? And the more I see what our families have and what our families are bringing, over 60% of our students are accessing some of that funding, that state funding. So we're and a common misperception there is that these micro schools or private schools are only for wealthy families. And really the reality is, our students that are accessing those funding are not from that demographic. In order to access that funding, you have to be from a different demographic. You're not a wealthy family if you're getting that funding in New Hampshire. And so we're able to provide a unique learning environment that's more tailored to the students, that's more individualized, that's more responsive to what the families are looking for. And we're able to do that only through programs like that. So the expansion of those programs is something that we're very supportive of and interested in, despite all three of our backgrounds in the sort of public system that is going to react very badly to that type of statement.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Nate. I mean, especially because you have so much experience in the public school system and you can see their concerns, and yet you still feel like the expansion of school choice policies that enable education funding to follow students is the path forward. Where do you see, I guess, the public system going? Do you think that they'll eventually respond to the competition and sort of these market-based incentives to change? Or, what is your prediction there?
Oh, wow. How much time we got, Carrie? That's a really, really interesting and tough question. And I think that what it comes down to is something that you actually said the first time we met. You were here, we were at an educational entrepreneurs conference, and you did this metaphor which really resonated with me, which is the fitness metaphor, right? You must remember this, but so if you're trying to get into fitness, you can go out there on your own and run on the road, right? And just be a jogger or a runner or whatever it is. I don't understand that. I don't love running. But or you can join a full service gym, right? That has a spa and a pool and a cafe and all that. And what the public system is the full service gym. And they're all the things that not every family needs. They're the varsity sports and the AP and the fields and the theaters and all that. We're not that. And we want to engage that homeschool community that's running on the road on their own. And we say, you can come have a running group with us. Like we'll do that with you. And we want to go up to sort of that level of, we also do, you can work out on your own, or you can come take a class with us, but we're not going to have the pool and the spa and the yoga classes and the Pilates classes and the weight, we're not going to be a full service gym, which is the public system. Or which is what it's trying to be. I'm not sure it's doing it too well, but it's what it's trying to do. And so, where I think is going is maybe a broader decoupling of all of these services into smaller units like ours that decide what they want. So our focus is less on what type of fitness do you want, running or a class or a spa. It's more on how do you get that focus that you're looking on. And our answer is small classes, right? So if that's your answer, we've got a market for that. And some families are going to be attracted to that, and some families aren't going to be attracted to that. And that's okay. Competition is good, right? And we'll figure out how to evolve based on what families and what students are interested in what we're doing. But that analogy really resonated with me. And I think that that's probably where education's in the medium term going to go. If you talk about where education in the long term is going to go, we've got a whole lot of thoughts about that,
But do you see, just to sort of throw this out, do you see the sort of long term as being more decentralized, market driven, more of the models that you're building at Harkness House?
I do. And we hadn't talked about this before, but I briefly mentioned it earlier, about our classrooms being set up as studios. And so we weren't able to do the sort of AV recording that we wanted to do, and producing and selling and all of that. But we just started audio recording all of our classes at the Harkness House. And the purpose for that is we partnered with an ed tech company that's taking all of those audio recordings and building a large language model AI, basically a teacher clone or teacher assistant clone. And if I look at what's 10 years in the future in education, I think that AI is going to play a big role, and we're starting to do that work here because we think that we can take the best teachers, and we think we have the best teachers here at the Harkness House, and we can take the best teachers and we can give more students access to those teachers on demand in a really interactive way through that type of interface. And so if I look at, I think it's going to be very decentralized, and I think there's going to be a lot of competition in the education space that's just driven by not only the organic stuff that schools like our school are doing, like the Microschool sort of meeting the needs of individual families nearby, but just in the technology expansion of that Microschool movement can be broadened so much more exponentially through this type of technology. And so that's where I think it's going long term.
So it sounds like you have a positive view of AI in the classroom and education. There's all kinds of concerns about AI. Do you feel like it's more of a positive outlook, positive future with AI, or what's your thought on that?
Tara, I will tell you this. I think technology in education is such a missed opportunity since the abacus, probably, but certainly in my career since the calculator. And so the last staff meeting I sat in 2020 in a public school, I listened to math teachers complaining about calculators. And that really happened. And math teachers complain about calculators, and then the personal computer came along and we didn't know how to use that. And then the internet came along and we were scared of Wikipedia. And then Zoom and Google Meets came along and we couldn't do that during the pandemic. And now it's AI and we're banning it. None of those things are going away. None of them have gone away. And my view as an educator is we need to stop belly aching about it, start embracing it and making it part of what we do. And I think there's a couple of ways to do that. On the educational front, we need to teach kids how to use these tools. We can't be banning them and getting them out of the classroom. And then on the administrative front, when I put on my head of school hat, I say, how can we make all of our great teachers more accessible to all the students that need them through this tool? And so I don't think that the traditional system is doing either of those things well. And so we're trying to do both of those things well. We have a class called Chat GPT and Me here at the Harkness House, which is all about teaching kids how to use that tool. And then we're also, like I said, recording our lessons and trying to figure out how to feed our knowledge base into a large language model so that we can actually have tutors, AI tutors that can help our kids when they're not in our classes.
I love all of that. I too am optimistic about AI in the classroom and technology being used for good, and that the benefits outweigh any of the drawbacks. And I think this Chat GPT and Me class sounds fascinating. It sounds like so many others would want to participate in that as well, even beyond Nashua. So Nate, you talked about uncoupling or decoupling, unbundling education. Education will be more decentralized, more a la carte, potentially. You are really focused at the Harkness House on serving middle schoolers, 6th to 9th graders as kind of full-time students. I wonder, what do you say to parents, or do you hear from parents who are saying, my child is thriving here, they absolutely love it here, and then they have to go off in 9th grade somewhere else? Are they upset about that? Are they concerned about that? And do you ever think about expanding into high school or partnering with others? I guess that's maybe the one downside of decentralization and decoupling education, is that there's more of that uncertainty and that unknowing of what's next.
Yeah, that's we haven't faced it yet because we're only in our first year of full-time enrollment, and we only have one full-time 9th grader this year. And so what she's talking about, and what her mom's talking to me about, is, well, we're just going to homeschool next year and send her back to you. Because we're not approved for 10th grade, right? And so we can go through that process and we could think about it. What that creates for me, I should say for us, for all three of us, is a real tension between our core mission, which is this adolescent learner, and it really is this 6 to 9 grade span. And if we expand up, then that divides our attention to what's credit bearing, what does a graduation transcript look like? How do we interface with colleges? All of these things that high schools need to be concerned about. And doing that well is really high stakes for families and students. And I don't want to minimize that work at all. That's kind of like why I'm saying I don't want to do that work, is because I don't know if I can do that really well. And so it's not something that we're averse to or not going to consider. It's just something that we're going to consider very deliberately. And we also happen to be right down the road from a great community college. Nashua Community College is a quarter of a mile down the road. And I'd almost rather invest in a bus and dual enroll kids in community college as they get into the older high school grades, and support them with tutoring here to do those community college courses, such that they're actually earning credits then towards something that they could use beyond the K-12 system. And so, that's kind of where my thinking is now, but we're really early. We're really early in that thinking.
So this is actually a good point to sort of talk about some entrepreneurial challenges. I think especially for school founders starting off small, trying to recruit and build up your cohort of students. How do you manage to balance commitment to your mission with responsiveness to the market or to parent demand? What advice do you have there for prospective education entrepreneurs?
So that's a great question. I would say there's a reason you're doing this. And if you lose that reason, you won't like what you're doing anymore. And so, that happened to me in public schools, right? I lost my reason. And it just didn't work out for me anymore. And it was a pretty big disaster. So I would just encourage folks to not stay single-mindedly focused on their original vision in like a sort of myopic way, but to sort of keep their eye on the original vision and make sure they're always going in that direction. Because if you start not going in that direction, and that's why I say we'll consider high school. I'd consider elementary school too. It's not that, because that'd be a great feeder system. That's why there are K-12 schools, right? It's because you get kids in the early grades and then they move up. I understand the economics of it. But I also understand the economics of it is once you have that system, resources flow down and they flow up because little kids are cute and they need to learn to read. And so we put them in small classes, and big kids are cool and they need to get AP credits and go to college. So we put them in small classes, and adolescent kids are weird. So we just put them in big classes and hope they skate across the pond, that's the original vision of the school. And so I'm really careful to not always keep that at least in the periphery and make sure we're headed in that direction.
So you're a year plus a few months into running Harkness House. As you reflect back on that kind of startup phase, what stands out to you? Some surprises, rewards, what has the last year been like?
I will tell you, the surprises have been, oh my God, we're still here, because it's been a challenge, that starting with one homeschool kid, we've got 8,000 square feet. We pay a lot in rent, starting with that one homeschool kid, it was touch and go there at the beginning. That's one of the surprises. One of the really just uplifting parts of it has been seeing the student growth, particularly in those kids that started last year as homeschool students. And, we hadn't talked about this, but the homeschool community is not one community. It's, and you talked about the growth of the homeschool community in New Hampshire of 30% or whatever. A lot of that is COVID avoiders. They saw and they didn't like, and so then they started homeschooling. Then there's a whole homeschool community that's the unschool community, that's a really philosophically homeschool and student-centered community. And then there's religious homeschoolers, and then there's homeschoolers that just don't want to do the government school thing. And so we take all of those students here, and what we've been so excited about and surprised and heartened about is that each type of that homeschool student, when they came here, they chose to do more with us, whether it was go from one class to a two-day program, or a two-day program to a four-day program, or a two-day program or a four-day program to a full-time program. We have been really excited about the fact that we've gotten that market response from what we're providing, which is you come and you try it out and you want more. And that is just really, really exciting for us.
So do you feel like it was worth it for you, kind of leaving the conventional system, the known paycheck, the place that you had kind of been for almost 20 years to head into this entrepreneurship and all of the uncertainties and risks associated with that? Was it a good choice?
Listen, if I could erase everything about the last 3 years and just go back and do what I was doing, I would not do that. This has been, it's terrifying. I don't want to sugarcoat it for anybody. It's hard work. It's more stress. I was talking to a potential funder the other day and I said, I was doing a pitch and I said, hey, listen, I'm not really good at this. My paycheck came from the taxpayer for 20 years and I don't know how to sell what I'm doing. But this is really good school. I just want to tell you it's really good school. And so we got that check. That was really exciting. I guess that worked. But it's that dynamic, right? And that's a really scary thing, to be out there and the uncertainty of it. But I wouldn't change a thing. I would not change a thing. And it's been an amazing ride. And we'll see where we are in a year, in 10 years, and 15 years. But I can say right now, I wouldn't go back and do it different.
Amazing. Well, I am so excited to follow your progress and see where you go and how many more learners you're able to serve in the coming years. So, Nate, what is the best way for my listeners and viewers to learn more about Harkness House, connect with you, and follow your progress?
Yeah, so we're at the Harkness House on Facebook. We've got a website, www.theharknesshouse.org. And they can email me directly at n.feldman@theharknesshouse.org.
Nate Feldman, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate your time, Carrie, and this has been fun. I appreciate it.